morning, and welcome to another episode of Devil's Advocate Trades Edition with Lisa McGrath, your host, moi. And joining me today is Cory Bilyk with a wonderful company, and he has got a background in plumbing. And so Cory and I are going to have a chat about all kinds of wonderful things today. So, hey, Cory, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
No worries. Thanks for being here. So, we were sitting down and having a little mini strategy session about kind of what we were going to chit chat about. And there were some really great topics that you were discussing with me in regards to some of the things you want to talk about. So where do you want to start? Let's go.
Well, let's throw something out there about addiction in the trades.
Okay.
I'm an alcoholic. I make no bones about it. Been clean for over 7 years, but I've seen a lot of people who have worked in the rough and tumble construction industry that have gone down a path that has been really harmful to them. It's from myself. It's both of my brothers. A lot of friends that I've seen in the recovery house that I went through that have relapsed several times. And I just think that it's because of the reputation that the trades have of being that environment where it's really rough. It's almost more acceptable, but then the stigma that comes along with it after you come out of that environment is very, very difficult to live with.
I agree. Addiction is a huge thing that goes on in the trades. And trades is such a broad, it's such a broad industry when we talk trades, right? We talk blue collar. And, when, you and I are more in the construction realm of it. And I've had, so I've got my safety background and, I've got 1,000 stories of guys that are on cannabis, at work. And I've got people, where I struggle the most is when, managers and bosses fail you on those types of addictions. What I mean by that, and I'm going to be very clear, because it's one of my biggest pet peeves working in industry, is when they are aware that somebody has an addiction of sorts and they do nothing about it. And they just sweep everything under the rug. They put everybody's safety in jeopardy. And they're like, people have been fired for less. People have been reprimanded for less, and they're like, well, this guy can work circles around this guy, or this woman can work circles around this woman. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. They are putting your entire livelihood and the livelihood of all of your staff, in jeopardy. One mistake can completely belly flop this entire operation. You're out of work. You've lost all these employees. They're no longer making money anymore. It's not fair. So either get them the support they need and help them to get to where they need to be. Because what you're doing is you're creating a very sour morale. Because everybody knows this guy is high all the time or drunk all the time, and he's putting everybody in jeopardy, and he's got keys to a company vehicle. And you're putting all of us in jeopardy. Because even if we're not with him on site, if something goes wrong, the entire company is put under investigation by OH&S. It's shut down.
Yeah.
And if
I'll
you're
tell you, that's one of the sorry, go ahead. That's one of the benefits that I find from working for a large company with a long legacy is that the policies and procedures are there. Unfortunately, the governmental regulations regarding FOIP, privacy, etc., have really handcuffed a lot of employers in that there has to be a chain, so to speak, of everything that you find and document and reprimand and then finally discipline and help ultimately. That has really made it difficult. I was drinking. I tell my story all over the place. I don't care who knows it. I was drinking literally at work. And so it was something that was harmful. My productivity was in the toilet, but that said, work had very little that they could do because I hit a lot of things really well. Mm-hmm. I had been drinking for a long time and I knew what they would be looking for and how to get around that. Yeah. And so it took a very long time before I finally messed up enough that they could get me the help that I needed. And I mean, again, a company that's been around for a long time, they gave me every bit of help that I needed. They paid to get me help. And, 7+ years later, here we are, I'm sales manager, and have worked my way up through the ranks. And, there's a lot more on the horizon. But that's the problem, I think, is that we we have been handcuffed by those regulations, and we see those people as valuable. We see them as people. We don't see them as throwaway, and we want to help them, but sometimes we just can't until we have the exact right circumstances to do it.
Here's the thing, though, Cory, with that being said, and not that I disagree with you, you are one in a million. There are
Hmm.
so many people that employers will spend their time and invest financially in helping someone to get to the other side
Hmm.
and support them. And even if they fall a couple times, they'll pick them up, dust them off, and say, it's okay. Take the day and come back and try again.
Yeah.
And you still remain solid in your work, and you said it's time for Cory to have a change. It's time for Cory to be better, a better Cory.
Yeah.
And that's what you told yourself, that when your job was probably at risk, and they said, like this, these are the options, and we want to invest in you. We think you're smart and you're good at what you do and this and that, but you got to get through this, and you got to get through it like this, because as you know,
Oh,
in
yeah.
every policy there's a drop dead, right? So it's like,
Right.
if you screw up this many times, or if you screw up to this point, it's toast. We're done. Like, we've done
Oh,
everything. So
I make no bones about it. I was laid off,
yeah.
and then they gave me help after that.
Yep.
So they made the move and said, you can no longer work here. We can no longer tolerate this. However, because you're a valued employee, blah, 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 we're going to, the rigmarole.
Yep.
We're going to give you an option. You come back to us and tell us what you'd like to do, and then we'll talk about it at that point. So um, I think that was the drop dead. You're right, that there is something that has to be done from an employment standpoint, where you can't continue to have that, because that sour taste will permeate the entire rest of your office, your workspace, whoever it is.
Yep. Yeah, because then you become the golden boy, untouchable, blah, blah, blah. And then people don't like you, or people try to cush up to you because they're being played favorite, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what they don't realize is that when you fall, they're going to fall just as hard, if not harder,
Right.
right? Because they always say you're guilty by association, blah, blah, blah. Now, with that being said, I mean, addiction is a hard thing. And I mean, like, I've created so many policies, and I've had help creating some of those policies. And one of the policies that were created when I was doing my HR stint with an amazing woman who she's an HR specialist. Her name is Eleanor Culver, and she created a template that was called Fitness for Duty. Like in 2015, she'd been working for like multiple different companies and industries across Canada. And so she had created this Fitness for Duty. And I told her everything kind of, I was like, listen, we're not a company that can tolerate these things and then put people through these programs when it comes to things like this, because a lot of these guys aren't in it to win it. They'll be like, yeah, sure, we're going to do the program. We spend $10,000 helping them get to where they need to get to, and then it just comes back, and then we're out that 10 grand, and then we're out that employee because they don't make it through, because the statistics are they're not in our favor as an employer. It sounds crappy, but like I said, you're one in a million. So you know she came up with this amazing policy, and it was a Fitness for Duty. And basically what it did is it was really in depth, and it went into how anything can affect you. It wasn't just alcohol, it was psychological, it was biological, it was everything. And she really went into an aspect of understanding prescription drugs, like people that are on Sudafed. It's going to affect you. You can't be operating heavy machinery and things like that. So it wasn't just targeting the people that were smoking cannabis or doing opioids or drinking alcohol. It wasn't just targeting them. It was going over, like, it was a broad, like, if you come to work and you're sick and you've taken NyQuil, you're going home, right? You're
Right.
not fit for duty.
Anything that impairs,
That's right. So
including lack of sleep.
exactly. And that was
Right.
another one, right? So it
Yeah.
was like lack of sleep. If you worked a 12-hour shift yesterday, then I have to take into consideration that you're going to go home, you have a family, you're going to spend time with your family. By the time you sleep, you're not even getting 8 hours of sleep.
Right.
And then you're coming back and you're doing the same hard work again. And
Yeah.
it can be very mundane, it can be very monotonous, and it can also be very strenuous. So we need to make sure that you're good. So a lot of these guys, a lot of employers will overwork their trade especially when you're really good at what you do,
Yeah.
when you're really good at your craft. They're like, we can't be down one day without this guy. And it's like, yeah, we can't.
Yeah.
The work's still going to be there. He's going to be back tomorrow. Give him the extra day down. And then what happens is, and as you know this, as an employee, you're like, I can't go without money. I can't be down that day and not make the money. And that's where I say to myself, when we're working our staff as hard as we are, why wouldn't we give them the day with pay? I'd rather give them a day with pay than have them be gone for 5 days and then be out my, and then some employers don't give any sick time, some do. But then you've got somebody that's down for days because they're exhausted, they're sick, they're burnt out. And now you've lost them for days, weeks, months. So it's
Yeah.
like, why not just give them the paid day off so that they can just recover and come
But
back?
that is almost impossible
I
to
know.
turn that tide from you only stay home if you're sick. If you're not dying sick, then you should still come into the office. That is, it's just starting, and I don't think it's even like 10% changed from what it's been for years. It's we're overcoming an institution, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and I think also the big problem is that, you know, we've got a generation that's coming in and talking like, I'm going to tell you, it was a culture shock for me, running a business, when I had employees coming to me and saying, I need a mental health day. And I'm like, what? Like, I was born in the early 80s. Like, what's a mental health day?
Right.
Like, what's that? You know? And they're like, and so then I had to sit down with my girlfriend again, who's an HR specialist, and I said, what is this? And she said, well, she's like, brace yourself because this is real. And she said, but you can, as an employer, do something about it. All you need is you need a note from a physician that this is legitimate. They're not allowed to tell you what it is. They're not allowed to tell, you can't ask. But what you can do is you can go to them and say, I require a document from your physician advising that from time to time you're going to require mental health days and that they support it based on what they know. And that's all I need. So none of them did it.
Right.
So then I was like, you don't need a mental health day, get to work. Um, or my favorite was the Saturday morning flu. You know what that is, right?
Yeah, I
So,
do.
yep. So the Saturday morning flu is my favorite. When I was like, you guys got to get to work on Saturday. And they were like, oh, I can't come in. I'm like, your shift's been scheduled for 3 weeks. Oh, I can't come in. Oh, yeah, sure you can. So, but there's the mental health days are the ones that I struggle with to this day because to me, a mental health day, I find that we have a generation right now that abuses that. They abuse the mental health day, whereas people like ourselves that have been around the block for, we were taught that you basically put up and shut up. That's what it is. You come to work 15 minutes to a half hour early. You get yourself prepared and then you start work and then you finish work. And if you have to go over 15 minutes, you don't whine about it. But now we've got a generation coming in, or that's in now, that's like, you start at 8, they don't show up till 8. You're done at 4, they're gone at 4. There is no more like, and they're like, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And on some level, I'm like, yeah, I agree. Employers, basically like rode the backs of all of their staff to get to where they are today and basically pushed them right into the ground and burn them out. But at the same time, that was also it's also a work ethic, and it's a generational thing, our work ethic, because that started all the way up with the boomers in the old household, and
Yeah.
and then the Gen X, and then the elder millennials, I guess I'll say. We're called Xennials is what we're called, because we're not quite millennials and we're not quite Gen Xers. We're right in the middle. But it's hard even now for me when I say, okay, your shift is at 8, and they pull up at 8. I just like my eye, and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like,
So
well,
let's talk about that a little bit more because
okay.
that directly impacts upcoming tradesmen.
Hmm.
So we get 5 sick days a year, and 3 flex days, and then in our office it's 3 weeks of vacation paid. And so what I'm seeing is I compare myself, I was born in 75, so I'm a little bit before you. But I compare what my sick days have been since I've cleaned up. So obviously it was a lot different back then. It was the 26-ounce flu, not the
Hmm.
Friday or Saturday morning flu.
Perfect.
But um, since I've been clean, I'm taking like 1 sick day a year.
Hmm.
This year has been 2, like, woo,
Yeah.
2. And like half a day of flex for a dentist appointment. And I'm seeing people using all of their sick days and all of their flex days by the time they get to the end. And it's like, well, it's there in case you need it. It's not there as free days off to
Hmm.
pay for
Yeah.
for your time off. I'm finding that I'm using sick days because I'm too sore from working too hard on the weekend at home. Like I'll take a Monday because I took one because I rode a tilled the garden and I was like wrecked physically. I couldn't even walk. I'm like, I have to stay home because I can't walk. I need to take some arthritis medication or something and just lay down for the day. But that's what's coming from. I don't get sick.
Yeah.
So are people actually getting sick, or is it just an abuse of taking the days? I don't even know what a mental health day is. I take care of myself. I mean, we talked earlier about Jill Drader and how she's got a very holistic approach, a very spiritual approach to life. Well, I take care of that. I take care of, I sit out in our hot tub at night with my wife with no screens and look at the stars for 20 minutes. But that is like the most intense quality, relaxed time that you'll ever get because you're one-on-one with the person that you're a soulmate with and you're quiet, contented, peaceful. Okay, good. I've decompressed. Well, what are people doing now? When are you making time for yourself? We talk about a work-life balance and we talk about all these days that are going off. Well, if that's the case, we should have the most well-balanced generation that is working right now that has ever been in the history of mankind because they've taken so much personal time and mental health time in order to recharge themselves. That's not happening.
No.
Where's the fold out here?
Right. Agreed. So it's like this generation has created a dynamic that was very necessary for the rest of us. Right? Saying it's okay to say no. It's okay to take time for you. So we're implementing that into our lives while maintaining that work ethic within reason and showing our employers that we're not just going to, use this willy-nilly. But then, like you said, the other generation is like I watch, it's fun. I watch a lot of social media. I do. That's my downtime. When my kids are chill and they've done their homework and it's after dinner and I just I want nothing. I want mind numbing boredom. I will just go on TikTok or whatever and scroll. And I just sit there and I giggle or whatever. And it's it's mind numbing, right? For me. So, but then I'll usually I'll turn it off and then I hang out with my kiddos. But at the end of the day, I watch there's this one lady and she shows how she deals with the Gen X that's coming in and just how they talk to her and they're like, bruh, I can't come in today because just adopted a puppy. And I'm like, what? Yeah, it's maternity leave. And she's like, no one's going to give you maternity leave for a puppy. And she's like, and they're like, what do you mean? That's so unjust. And I'm like, oh my God, I would poke my eyeballs out.
Right.
I'd be like, you're fired. What happened?
And then HR is involved and it's a big mess.
Well, mind you, we're in Alberta. We can fire you for the color of your eyes as long as we pay you. Pick up your check. But I mean, I'm like, it blows my mind, right? Because it's and then you've got these people that are there's one that's like, oh, I can't go to that location because it gives me the creeps. I got really bad vibes. It doesn't pass the vibe check. And she's like, what? Or you need to come and pick these things up and take them to the post office. That's not a thing anymore. Post office don't exist. That's so archaic. You should stop living in the 1900s. And I'm like, oh my God, post office is still exist.
I know. My blood pressure's rising right now, literally. I can feel it. It's frustrating though. But how do you motivate that? How do you motivate that into, so is it the generation? Is it a lack of responsibility? Is the parents' fault? Where does this come from? Because I'll use the example of my son. So my son got a job right before COVID. His goal when he got out of high school was to take the fastest course possible with the highest paying hourly rate coming out of it. So he took a 6-month course to become a medical unit clerk, and he got a job with a large healthcare provider that has locations all over Calgary and Alberta, and he worked from home during COVID. Well, honestly, he was sitting at home, smoking dope, working from his computer at home, and I'm like, what is going on here? Totally, get up in the morning, doesn't need to have a screen on, so he would sit in his with his quilt around him, doing his work on his, and he's the WCB coordinator for Southern Alberta. I'm like, what? Is this real? Is this actually happening? You don't have to get dressed, you don't have to shave, your hair's all messed up. I don't get that. And so I thought that was like, okay, well, it's our fault. We didn't raise him right. I'm working from home and I'm like dressed in my normal work clothes, shaved, everything was all clean, ready to go. But then I look at the lack of responsibility, and I look at the fact that they were paying him very little. It was actually less than minimum wage because it was a salaried position, and it was during COVID, so nobody cared about that. They just had a job. And I look at now, guess what? He's a tradesman. He's a third-year refrigeration apprentice,
Good for him.
and he's got one child, our grandchild, another one on the way. He's married. They just bought their first house. And I'm like, okay, now he shows up early. He gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He goes to work. He makes good money. He's now just changed. Something changed in his head that he's got the responsibility and he's got that work ethic now.
Yeah.
So is that from the responsibilities that he has familially? Is it from the job change? Is it the trade? Or is it the fact that he's just somehow dropped the generational thing and has suddenly become responsible?
I think it's a great question to probe because I'll tell you right now. So my kids are 14 and 11.
Okay.
And
Have fun.
well, my she turns 14 on Friday, and she's she's a good girl. I'm not gonna lie. Like everyone's like, oh my god, when you get girls that are in their teenagers, they're crazy. But you know what? She's such a good girl. I was very blessed. My son is me. I'm gonna have a hell of a time, but I am having a hell of a time. It's a great ride. So they always say, get a taste of your own medicine. Yeah, should have stopped at one. So, but it is what it is. So. I believe that there is one thing I will tell you that I've noticed as a parent. Too many parents now. So your son is still in that cusp. He's like that gen. He's like millennial. When was he born? He was born in the 90s?
He was born in 2001, so he's 24 years old, 23 years old.
Okay, so he's like end of millennials, Gen Z kind of thing, right? That's where he is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that it comes down to a few things. I think it comes down to parenting. I think it comes down to society. I think it comes down to peers. I think it comes down to what workforces will allow you to do. When I say parenting, what I mean by that is that there's two different types of parents. There's parents that do anything and everything to make your life comfortable, and then there's parents that make you uncomfortable. And so what happens is he gets into the societal norms of, well, my friends are doing this, my friends are doing that. Well, I don't really have to do it. Well, I have a job. Well, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks at dad and he looks at mom and he goes, well, they work really hard and I don't want to live like this. I want to live like this, and this is what I want. So maybe I need to take a page out of dad's book and mom's book. And then they go do that, right? That's what happens a lot of times, is that it's just a matter of just, I guess, growing up. What do I really want to do? Right? So, and that's a great thing that your son was like, he snapped out of it and was like, I want to be the best I can be at this. I want to have a future. I want to have a wife. I want to have a baby. I want all these things. So I think it's just the desires that come with it. But I will tell you this, being a parent with kids nowadays, my son now considered what we call the honey badger generation. So he's alpha, and my daughter is at tail end of Gen Z. There is a lot of parents who lawyer for their children versus referee, like when we were kids. Kids get into an argument, you just sit there and make sure not some massive altercation comes out and it turns into a disaster. You just basically let them kind of figure it out on their own, because it's critical thinking. You got to let kids figure out their own problems, solve their own problems. But you got too many parents that are running into the schools, screaming at the teachers, screaming at the faculty, screaming at the other parents, lawyering for their kids. And that's not what it's about. Advocating for your children, yes, 100%. That's what you are. You are their advocate. But lawyering for them where they've done nothing wrong, my kids' school knows that if they're calling me and it's something my kids have done bad, they know I'm coming into the school and I'm going after my kids. I'm not going after the faculty. So, and I'm going to say, it's going to be, okay, both parties, what happened? And my son, when he gets in trouble, he stutters. I know he's like, he
I love it. So cute.
Right? So he's like, well, mama. And I'm like, no.
The end.
Yeah. Whereas my daughter looks away. So she looks down and then she looks to the side away from me, lie. So I'm like, stop lying. And she's like, I'm not lying, Mom. Yeah, you are. I'm your mother. So It's just, I think there needs to be that balance now, because the generation that is coming, because part of it is parents. A lot of parents do too much for their kids, because we all got our asses kicked by our parents. There was
Yeah.
no mercy. It wasn't spankings, it was beatings. That's what most of us got. Like, that's why kids help phone became a thing in the 80s. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, I mean, but then we almost went the opposite direction, and then nobody was like disciplining their children because they were too scared to discipline their children because the government was involved, or they were just scared of the impact because they know what it did to them, right? But I think
I
it's
still remember my oldest son will probably kill me that I'm saying this, but I remember he was probably like 10, and they got spankings when they were kids. I'm not saying it's positive or negative or it's better or
I
worse,
think too.
but they got spankings. That's what I grew up with. And I'm like, over the knee, and he's like, no. And then he's like, he ran away, and he grabbed the phone and he called 911
Oh, good.
because he had watched somebody say that it's okay if you're in a situation of distress as a child, you need
Yeah.
to call and like ask for help, right?
Yeah.
And he got off the phone, and I looked at him like, what did you do? Like, what's wrong with you? And he said, well, I didn't want a spanking, and you're going to give me a spanking. I'm like, well, now you risk being taken away from us. Like now the police are going to come to the door. And I mean, by the time that we were done talking to him, he was like scared silly that the police are coming. I'm like, you got to talk to them. They're at the door. I open the door. I'm like, here's my son. Feel free. Have at her.
Mhm.
But that's the generation that we're raising, that kids have. It sounds so bad to say they have rights, but they do have rights. They like to be treated human, like as humans. Um, but as parents, we also have a God-given, a governmental given, whatever, a right to raise them to be good people. And if we lose that, we don't discipline them, we don't train them, we don't counsel them, we don't give them any direction whatsoever, and then we expect that they're going to grow up to be good humans and show up to work on time and go out and have responsibility and make money and not screw people over, then suddenly we are the problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think that we all, as parents, have a right to raise our children in the best way we see fit, as long as we are, doing all the things that they need to do, and we're not beating the crap out of our children, and we're not abusing them in some way that is going to ultimately deteriorate who they are as people.
Right.
Um, there's a lot of really amazing parents in the world, and they get, because they've taken such a sidestep. There, do you know there's more? I guess I'll say it. There's more narcissistic people in the world now than there was before I can even think of, because narcissism wasn't really a term we identified or acknowledged.
Right.
But I find that there's so many more of them out there, where it's just the sense of entitlement, and just I'll do what I want, how I want, when I want, and anyone who steps in my way, I'm going to get rid of them. But oh no, I'm not done, doing what I need to do with that person. So I'm just going to tell them whatever they need to hear so that they'll just shut up and put up. And I'm just like, where are these people coming from? And they're like all different ages. And I'm just kind of perplexed that this is even a thing that's coming about now. And people say it's a mental illness. I'm like, no, it's an entitlement issue. Narcissism is not a mental illness. It's an entitlement issue.
So much for being kind and compassionate, Lisa. Wow.
Well,
All the
Jesus.
narcissists out there are gone out of your audience.
Oh, darn.
One fell swoop, you just pop.
That's the best part. Narcissistic people don't admit to being narcissists. So they've got them all.
That's too funny.
Not a narcissist. Yeah, you are. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
Right? God, people are crazy, but it is what it is, And I mean, I think that we as parents really try to create a balance. And I'll tell you, I've got a quick story for you. You're gonna love this. So I'm half Caribbean. My father's from Guyana, and
Okay.
my mother is from Quebec. Okay, so my mom is French Canadian and Irish,
Okay.
which is where I get the McGrath from. Because everyone's like, how McGrath? And so that's where that comes from. My grandpa came from, well, his father came from Ireland. So, funny story, I had my son, and both children, when they were born, have what's called Mongolian spots. Have you heard of them?
No.
So Mongolian spots are basically like a buildup of metabolic acids, and they make it almost looks like a bruise. That's what it looks like. They're
Okay.
like blue. Okay, so my kids, being 75% Caucasian, 25% Caribbean, of course these metabolic buildups show up real well because they're
Yeah.
light skinned. So when I had my daughter, there was no problem. But when I had my son, they send the public health nurses out to the house. And the first question she said to me was, um, are you Aboriginal? And I'm like, no, I'm part Caribbean and French Canadian and Irish. And she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, am I sure of my own ethnicity?
And
I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, I'm sure. Why? And she's like, oh, we're just wondering. And I said, okay. And she says, well, what are all these marks on the baby? And I said, those are Mongolian spots. They're metabolic acid buildup that happens. And I said, it's across Mongolia. Aboriginal babies can get it, and African babies can get it. And it's actually quite normal amongst the different ethnicities. And I said, but because my kids are 75% Caucasian, it's a lot easier to see. And she was like, oh, okay, left. I had child and family services at my door less than 12 hours, banging on my door, telling me that my son was in imminent danger. I'm like, what? And I open the door and they're like, we got a report that your son is in imminent danger because he's an infant. He's like 5 days old. I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, I just got out of the hospital less than 24 hours ago, which means all of these happened inside the hospital. Maybe he
Yeah.
needs to go to the hospital and have a conversation with what they did with my son. And she's like, well, that's not funny. And I'm like, I'm not, do I look like I'm
I'm
laughing?
not joking. Yeah.
I'm like, I said, I already know for a fact that the hospital I came from didn't do anything to my son. He sat in my room with me, and I had to wake up every so many hours and nurse my child because that's what happens when you have babies. And I'm like, so his father was there, his sister was there, my mother was there. I'm like, there's zero reason that this is a problem. And then I explained the whole thing to her. So she talked to I had a therapist that I would go see all the time after babies because postpartum.
Yeah.
I had babies after 30, so that's a thing. So, and so I went and they talked to my therapist, they talked to my doctor, and then my doctor's like, "What are you guys doing? That's normal." And they're like, Lisa's ethnic background would cause this type of metabolic buildup, blah 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 blah. My doctor just went upside one of her and down the other, and she's like, "Thanks, now you've just triggered full on postpartum on her." Awesome. They're like, get out of her house. And so then, and which is true, it triggered full on
Yeah.
postpartum at that point. So, because you freak out, you stress. So, and postpartum is a very real thing. And so I had to go see my therapist like twice a week to just with baby, and I just sit there and have a conversation with her, and tell her, she'd have to sit there and remind me like, everything you're doing is fine. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't worry. Your body's trying to adjust and process all this information. And it's hard. A lot of women don't realize that they go through these postpartum because it's not always about wanting to hurt yourself or hurt your baby. Sometimes it's just feeling it's like feeling emptiness.
Yeah.
It's just, you know what I mean? It's like the monotony of going through the everyday motions but feeling nothing.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. So I mean, like, I got postpartum when I had my daughter. That one was scary. I won't tell you. I mean, she was like the nicest baby in the world. She'd never
Oh.
cry. And I was just like, what if I just threw her in the snow and closed the door?
Oh my God. It's so
It
dark.
goes through your head. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, and I'd cry because I was like, I want my baby so bad. Like, I wanted this baby so bad. And now I'm like thinking about throwing her outside the door in November.
Now that's a mental health day.
Right? Well, it's
Yeah.
it's postpartum, right? That's what
I
it
know.
is.
Yeah.
So I had to go down to my doctor and I told them everything and they were like, okay, no problem. And I went through a therapist and it was fine. Everything was, they don't take your baby away. They don't try and take your children because you're not acting upon it. You're saying, these are feelings that I'm having and I don't understand why. And they're like, it's not you. You've got slammed with so many hormones to make this child, and now your body's trying to regulate to go back to this one
Yeah.
person that
Yeah.
you were well before. It's terrifying for women. I'm not going to lie to you. Postpartum is a horrible thing, especially when you're a working mom and you have to go back after, like when they're like, oh, you only get like, some people only get 3 months. When they say like a year, now they've kind of stretched it out to 18 months.
Yeah.
But when you go back after a year, you're still, postpartum is from the time, even right before baby's born, up until 5 years old. A woman can get triggered into postpartum or have it for that long. Like, and that's scary because your body's not completely done being crazy.
Yeah.
Like, is the easiest way of saying it. But yeah, that's my story. That's why I get it. Like, I'm sitting here going, why is social services at my door for nothing that's happened? It's almost like they're wasting their time on little things. Like there was no discussion of there's no violence, there was nothing. It was just she saw those marks and was like went off on a wild goose chase.
And made an assumption.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awful, right? And I mean, my daughter called the police once because the power went out and she was scared.
Oh, God.
That's a fun one, eh? Cops come to the door. It's like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
They're like, "Can I help you?" They're like, "Oh, 911 was called from this residence."
Well, at least she knows to call the police when she's scared. That's a good idea.
It's true. And so then I was like, "It was?" And I call my daughter. She was like 2, and I'm like, "Honey, did you call the police?" She's like, "Yes, the power went out, and I was scared, Mom." I was like, "Oh, well, they came." And she's like,
Sorry.
"Oh," she's like, "Okay." And the guy was started giggling because he's like, "I got a 2-year-old too." He's like, "That's so cute." So you gotta love that. But yeah, that's kind of so between addiction and dealing with the generations. What else you got for me? I got about 6 minutes.
Um, let's just talk briefly about doing what you say you're going to do. So this also ties into the younger generation coming up. I mean, you talk about showing up on time for work.
Mm-hmm.
You say to your employer, I'm going to work 8 hours for you. Well, sorry, I'm not a morning guy. I roll in like 5 minutes before my shift start, but I'm at my desk by 8 o'clock or by 7:30 was when we start. But I'm sitting here, my coffee. I have a coffee maker in my office. It's brewing. My laptop is open, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's translate that showing up and doing the job you say you're going to do to companies that say they're going to do something and then don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean the very premise of a business transaction is you say you're going to do something and then you provide that service and then the person pays you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that even more recently, I mean, there's been such a move within our industry, the trades in general, construction in general,
Mm-hmm.
that people will go into a building and they'll be like, you know what, we're going to do this for you for free. And then because of that, you're going to give us more work. There's been vendor programs throughout our industry where people have to pay for the potential to do work with a company.
Yep.
And I'm tired of it. I mean, maybe it's old school. Maybe I'm just getting older and I don't have time for BS in my life anymore. But I go to somebody and I say, we're going to do this, and we do it. I don't promise it unless we can deliver.
100%.
I don't go in and try and get people to work with our company unless we can actually make a difference in their world. And if we can't, then why are we even talking about doing business? It's slimy. So, I mean, that opens up a whole more than 6 minutes worth of a conversation, that's for sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I'm going to tell you, I've been part of some of those vendor programs, and mine's coming up for renewal, and it's not going to happen. They haven't given me one thing this year,
Yeah.
and I paid to be a part of their program, and I've got zero from them. So I'm like, no, my ROI hurts if I can't make whatever you pay in an investment. Right? You have to, so in your marketing, so this is a part of a marketing aspect because you want me to be a part of your marketing program, as your vendors program, so that I pay, $400 to sit on a list that anybody in your company can use, and you don't utilize my services not even once, I'm not paying again.
Oh, okay. So let's be very clear here. I'm not talking about the like ComplyWorks kind of stuff where you pay like $300 or $400. I'm talking about where a company says, okay, you're going to be on our preferred vendor list, and for every single thing that you do, if it's a fixed cost contract that you get through a company, like through a condominium board or through a business, you're going to pay us 10% on top of that.
Kickback. Yeah.
So we're talking about hundreds of that. We're talking about actually millions of dollars that could be flowing from one company to another with nobody else being the wiser. It's a gag order on it. It's complete silence. You're not allowed to tell your customer that you're working for that exists. I've been approached probably 4 different times, 4 different companies in the Calgary area, and we refuse to sign those agreements because that's graft, that's kickbacks, that is just something that is completely unacceptable ethically.
Yeah.
I've never worked like that. I believe in you do a good job, you get more work. You
Yeah.
don't advertise, we get work because we've done good jobs in the past.
I love what you just said that, Cory, because you know it's funny because I tend to be quite the master connector with people. If
I've
you're
heard.
good, yeah. So, but right. But I do. I like to connect people. If you can do something for somebody, why wouldn't I just put you in front of them? Like
Right.
what you guys do with it, I open the door. How you walk through and sit down is on you. That's it.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, Lisa, you should charge for that." And I'm like, "Ew.
Why? Why?
Ew.
Why
No."
not just know and have the confidence that, you know what, Lisa's name is now in the back of my mind. And the next time that I know somebody that needs connection that can help Lisa, I'm going to refer them to her because I know darn well that she was the best thing for them.
Right?
Is that old school?
No, you know what it is? It's because it's too ethical.
Oh, shocker, right? But that probably comes, maybe that kind of conviction comes from me cleaning up. And because a big part of sobriety is don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. I mean, basically it's the 10 Commandments. I mean, don't screw people over and you'll have a good life.
Yeah.
And when I look at that, I mean, I have a really hard time sitting in front of somebody and saying that we're going to do something,
Yeah.
and then seeing my team not be able to do that. So I take it very personally because if I make a promise, I stick by it.
100%.
I told you, I made a promise to my wife almost 30 years ago. I stick by it. I make a promise to my kids now that we're going to be there for them to help them with something at their house. I stick by it. I make a promise to work that I'm going to give them more than what I promised to do for them.
Yeah.
I earn my paychecks. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that I get paid well. It's because I do a damn good job, and I will do everything that I tell them that I'm going to do. Those kinds of values, I think, are just kind of gone in the entitlement culture. Let's get as much as we possibly can for as little possible work. And then if the company finds out, oh, well, see ya.
It's true. Do you ever look at some of the resumes that come through? It's 6 month bump. It's a bumps every 6 months. Do you notice that?
Yeah.
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 I'm like, how at 26 years old are you at 90K?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And they're like, oh, well, I worked for this guy for 6 months and this guy for 6 months. And then I started off as this and this and this. And then all of a sudden they're a project manager. And I'm like, you couldn't project manage out of a paper bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who do you know? Or better yet, what are you doing to be where you are? Because it can't be ethical at this point. And I agree with you 100%. Like the ethics are getting lost, and I hate to say this, but I preach it. It starts from the top. Lead by example. Whatever you're doing, don't go after your staff if they're doing the same thing you are, just on a lower scale. But you don't like it, too bad. Then don't do it yourself.
Right.
Yeah, agree with you 100%. I think that's amazing. I think it's great that you do a great job where you are. That's why you are where you are, and that's why they see so much potential in you, and that's why you're an amazing investment. Period.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's so hard to say that. Oh my God. Oh, that freaks me out to say thank you like that. Ugh.
You're like, don't give me a
I'm just doing my job, Lisa. Just doing my job.
Yeah, but doing your job is what makes you and is what makes you a wonderful investment. So that's what I think we forget as, those Gen Xers and those, Xennials. We forget that we are an investment to our companies, and that they see something in us and they know our true potential when they do pay us well and when they do give us that movement and that mobility through the company, right?
Yeah, and they expect an ROI. I mean, it truly is an investment. It's an investment in humanity instead of an investment in something on the stock market, right?
Yeah. You know what? You're lucky to work for a company that sees that, because there's so many that don't.
I'm very blessed every day. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Well, I'm going to wrap us up, but you're always welcome to come back on the show, Cory, if you'd like. Don't ever
Anytime,
think.
Lisa.
Yeah, I think, and there's a couple topics that you want to talk about that I want to touch on. So let's try and book in another session at some point. You are amazing. Thank you so much, Cory, for being on my show. So if you'd like to be on Devil's Advocate, you can hit me up at lisa@lpmenterprises.net and book in a time. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Lisa.